Okay. Okay, I apologize for the technical difficulties we experienced here. We are going to continue our study in Chronicles, and we kind of had a brief introduction, and I must probably apologize in advance for the fact that I am going to spend a little more time, at least in chapter 1, with the genealogy, because there's some things and some points that I want to make as I do that, and because of that, I will probably read these myself, because some of these words are tongue twisters. All right, and so just bear with me. But before we get started, let's do what we must always do, and that is open our study with a prayer. Heavenly Father, we are so thankful for this day, so thankful for the opportunity we have to come together and study your word, to come together and worship you, and to prepare ourselves for the work in your kingdom. We know that your power and your majesty is beyond all comprehension. We thank you so much for the creation. We thank you for the wisdom and the love behind it. We thank you so much for the mercy and grace that you give us, knowing that you have given us free will, and that we would abuse us, that we would abuse it. You've found a way to reconcile us to you, and still satisfy your justice. We thank you so much for that, and we thank you for the wisdom. We thank you for the knowledge that you have that surpasses our ability to even take it in. But we thank you for your word. We thank you for the opportunity that we have to study it, and on our own feeble way to learn to follow your will, to learn what your will is for us, to learn a bit about your nature, a bit about your essence, and a bit about your attributes, knowing that we will know so much more in eternity with you in heaven. And that is what we strive for. And we ask that you continue to guide us and protect us in that endeavor. We thank you for those who are here today for this Bible study. We thank you for those who are traveling to be with us for our regular service. We thank you for those who have joined us online, and we know that there are some who are dealing with infirmities or recovery from injuries and or surgeries, and our thoughts and prayers go with them at this time. We thank you so much, Heavenly Father, for the providential care that you give us through the healing wonders of our body, this body that you have given us, and through the skills you place in the hands of the doctors and the nurses and the healthcare professionals. We ask, though, Father, that you hear our prayers and our pleas on behalf of Fran Colson, who is still recovering from her illness, and we're thankful that she has been able to recover thus far, and we actually may be able to visit with her later on today. But we ask that you continue to guide her and protect her. We ask that you be with Olin as he recovers from his surgery. We're thankful for the successful surgery with we ask that you continue to strengthen him and guide him through what's going to be an uncomfortable rehabilitation process. We ask that you be with his sister, and that you be with her husband as they continue to deal with post-surgery, and also deal with other age issues, as well as Barbara continues to care for Wayne. We ask that we be with Teresa's husband as she continues to care for him, and be with Teresa as she holds together the family. We ask that you be with Jim and Sandra. We thank you so much for the opportunity that we have to spend time with them, spend our lives with them, and we thank you for the effect that they have, not only on our congregation but on the community and on their family. We ask that you be with them as they are dealing with some short fuse changes in their family reunion plans, and we know that that's going to be involved, and we know that it's stressful, especially for Sandra and Jim, and we ask that you strengthen them as well. Be with their daughter and son as they are traveling in Illinois for a funeral and for post funeral preparations. We ask that you be with Rob and Tootin, Willa Dean's daughter-in-law, and be with their son Sammy as as Robbie has experienced a heart attack, and Sam is here to be with her at this time. We know that he normally works, and we ask that you be with him as he has come to be with her, and also as he returns to go back to work again. We ask that you strengthen all of us. We're thankful that we've got Betty here, and that we've got that we've got Esther here, and we're so thankful for the recovery that Kathy's been able to experience with her eyes, but we know that they're still bothering her a bit, and so we ask for continued healing on her behalf. We ask that you be with Mike and Karen as they work to provide support for so many of their family who are struggling with nerve issues and with injury issues, knee issues, and we're thankful for the recovery that they've experienced. But we also know that there's some up and down health issues that are going on there, and we thank you so much for Mike and Karen's strength and giving them the strength and the courage to continue to hold that family together and do those things that are necessary. There's so many others in our congregation and family and friends and members of our congregation that, of course, our thoughts and prayers go out to Keith and Camille, and we know that Camille is recovering from some broken toes, and Keith has been dealing with some AFib issues, and we know that you are working with the doctors and the nurses to help them as well, and we thank you for that. We ask that you bring all of our family, friends, and loved ones back to that walk of life, which is in accordance with your will. We thank you so much for the protections that you've offered our family and our friends and our loved ones, and we ask that you continue to guide our nation. We ask for a revival that will bring our nation back to doing your will, so that we can once more become a beacon of righteousness in the world. We ask that you continue to guide us and protect us in our day-to-day comings and goings, and we offer this prayer in the name of your precious Son. Amen. So now, here we go. Here's McAfee again. Whew, boy, it just never ends. Okay, so we talked about Chronicles, and we talked about the fact that it was but the title of Chronicles was assigned during the process of translation of the Septuagint, and this was under Alexander the Great, and so we see that Chronicles is just is an adoption of a series of names that have been assigned, and were assigned by Jerome as he translated the manuscript into Latin for I guess the Bishop of Rome was his commission to do so. Okay, and of course we note that it was because of the size of the work that it was broken up into 2 volumes when it was translated, because when it's translated into another language there was a lot more involved, because now they've inserted vowels, and vowels add to the length of it, the composition. So they have so that's why we have it in 2 volumes now instead of 1, and they chose a convenient place to break it, and that of course was not divinely inspired where they broke 1st and 2nd Chronicles. In fact, where they put the chapter breaks and the paragraph breaks was not divinely inspired either. That was the work of translation as Phil. Yes, LXX. It's called the LXX, and the reason it's called the LXX is because whenever Alexander the Great instituted Greek as the language of the realm, after he conquered the Medo-Persians and stretched his empire into North Africa and all the way to the coast of India and all the way up to the Black Sea on the European continent, as he stretched that, he decreed that Greek, a Koine Greek, a simple form of Greek, okay, a specific dialect of Greek. You know, we have English, we have proper English, and we have all sorts of different dialects of English. And so he picked one and he fixed it and he set it as the language of the realm. And when he did so, one of the things that he did was he gathered 70 Bible scholars. That's what Septuagint means. At LXX, it means the 70. He gathered 70 Bible scholars together at the great library of Alexandria, and he set them to work translating the Hebrew version of the Old Testament. Hebrew, it was Hebrew. In I think there are at least 3 different languages involved in the production of the Old Testament, and they were all translated into Greek. Now, there There were some obvious problems involved with that. So any translational issues, any syntax or any verb root issues that we deal with are probably can be traced back to that process of translating, those 70 scholars translating from the Aramaic and the Hebrew and the Akkadian language into Greek, if you will. So that was done in Alexandria, and that was done at the behest of Alexander the Great. Okay, again, Alexander the Great was impressed with the fact, and there's an interesting story there. Whenever the Greeks came through and they were going to invade Jerusalem after the Jerusalem had been repatriated, they were going to invade Jerusalem. They were met by the chief priest and the scholars who met with Alexander and said, basically, where have you been? We've been waiting on you. And he said, what do you mean? And they brought out the passages in the Old Testament where Isaiah predicted and Daniel predicted that Alexander the Great would become the ruler. He was so impressed with that he was as close to being converted as possible at that point. Okay? Just as Cyrus was. See once again the hand of God playing into the translation process and the protection process of Holy Scripture. It's a wonder. And we'll talk a little bit perhaps more about that later on in our lesson. Yes, Phil?
Some would suggest that this is the beginning of the fullness of time because of the common language that
yes.
the edict that
and while I might not agree that it was the beginning of the fullness of time, I would certainly agree that it was a very pivotal moment is in contributing to the fullness of time. And what Phil's talking about, the fullness of time, is the preparation that it's Galatians 2:20, isn't it? Yeah. The preparation that was involved, God's preparation involved in setting the stage for the Christian age, setting the stage for the spread and the protection of the gospel. And it started way back in prehistory. And when we look at Chronicles, we see God's hand. And if we look at the genealogy, and that's the reason I don't want to gloss over the genealogy too casually, if we look at the genealogy, we find key events that are recorded. And I'm going to be relying on, there's a series of commentaries, done by the old scholars, pre-Dead Sea Scroll time for the most part, okay? And some of these were found with the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they're called Targums. Those are commentaries by Bible scholars on the Scripture. Although they're not divinely inspired, there's a great deal of history in there that ties in the divinely inspired writings to the events, not just these events of Chronicles, but the events that we see in Genesis, the events that we see in Exodus. And so we're going to note a couple of things as we go through. All right. So having said that, I'm not going to bother. We note that Ezra was in all probability the scribe, but he didn't do it himself. He had a lot of work from contemporary prophets of those days. And he also, because he was the scribe, had access to a lot of public records, like genealogies. And remember that those records had been kept not just by Abraham, not just by the Jews, but they had been kept as a matter of administrative course by many of the other kingdoms. And then whenever Babylon and then again Persia conquered, they brought these documents together in a place where they could be collected. And so we see that a lot of this work had been pre-compiled. And again, that's the unseen hand of God working to pull these things together for us. Okay? So we talked about the historicity and the archaeology and how well it's supported. We also talked about the purpose of the work, and we looked at what was behind Ezra's work. Faithful adherence to the covenant with the Lord, who brought heaven, and forsaking the covenant ensured disaster and ruin. The lessons to draw that the true Israel, as far as he was concerned, was restricted to those who remained in a covenant relationship with God. That's a lesson that's important for us to remember, okay? Unless we remain in a covenant relation with God under the New Testament, we are not part of spiritual Israel. Once saved, always saved is a myth. Irresistible conversion by the force of the Holy Spirit is a myth. These are choices we must make and bring ourselves into accordance with the will. All right. So I'm going to of Chronicles, and we note that there's some very important things. And I looked at the outline, okay? And we look at First Chronicles, and we see that it deals with the first 9 chapters or genealogies. And then we get to the history of David's reign. Now, the first 2 chapters deal with genealogies, pretty much up to David. And then after that, we see family genealogies of David's siblings, if you will. Okay, and so Second Chronicles, and we look at the United Kingdom from Solomon until the Civil War, if you will, the fracture between the Northern Kingdom and the Kingdom of Judea. And then we look at Rehoboam through the captivity to the decree of Cyrus. Remember that Cyrus basically wrote the decree that set the groundwork for the Jews being able to be repatriated to Judea. And it's interesting to note, remember how Luke has his gospel account, and then Luke's gospel account then segues immediately into the book of Acts, okay, Acts of the Apostles, and you see that overlap between the last of Luke and the first part of Acts. You see that same overlap, that same breakdown, as you see that Second Chronicles ends with the decree of Cyrus, and Ezra picks up there, the book of Ezra, okay? And so you see that same sort of continuity involved in overlapping works of these scribes. I will not call them authors and should not call them authors, okay? They are scribes. God is the author of our Bible, okay? All right. So now we'll get to First Chronicles. We look at the descendants of the patriarchs, and I'm going to note a few things here as we go, and I've gotten a few, and again, bear with me, okay? We're going to kind of work our way through this, only because there's some salient points that must be brought up, all right? So, the descendants of the patriarchs: Adam, Sheth, that's Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Henoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Okay? Now, it jumps into the sons of Japheth and the sons of Ham as we continue on. Okay? And then down in verse 17, it starts to address the sons of Shem. And so one might say, well, you know, what happened to Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, and Lamech? Well, to start with, remember, these men lived not in, their lifespan was not measured in decades, it was measured in centuries. Okay? I mean, look at Methuselah, lived to be 900. The only one that did not live to be that long was Enoch, and that's because God took Enoch. Okay? Apparently, the implication is he was directly translated to be with God. He was a man of God. Okay? And so we see that happening. But then we jump to the sons of Japheth and Ham and Cush, because what happened between the sons of Adam and the sons of Noah? The flood. So guess what? They started all over. So there's no genealogy for these men, because it's not relevant anymore, because not only did they die, but all of their descendants died as well in the flood. Okay? And so God wiped the slate clean and he started over. And here's the genealogy of the sons of Japheth. Okay? Look at the sons of, and we talked about the sons of Japheth, and Gomer, and Magog, and Madai, and Javan, and Tubal, and Meshach, and Tiras. And remember that Tubal was not a good man. Okay? What's that? No, not yet. I don't think there is a slide there. That's him. Okay. And so I read the sons of Japheth, get to the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, and Riphath, and Togarmah, and the sons of Javan, Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. And you see the name Tarshish here. Okay? Tarshish is an island, and I believe it's Cyprus. Okay? So the sons of Japhan had an influence in the Mediterranean Sea culture. And Tarshish is referred to in the Bible as a seagoing civilization centered around, I believe it's the Isle of Cyprus. If it's not Cyprus, it's the Isle of Crete. And again, my geography fails me just a bit there. Okay? So we look at the sons of Ham in verse 8. I go back to the sons of Ham, Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. You've seen the name Put. You've seen the name Canaan. You've seen the name Cush and Mizraim. And then I talk about the Jewish commentary, the Targum. And according to the Targum, Cush and Mizraim settled in Egypt and Arabia. They are Egypt and Arabia. They are the progenitors line of humanity. Okay? All right. So then we get to the sons of Cush, Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Ramah. And again, Ramah is a town in Canaan. Ramah is mentioned in the Bible as a city. Okay? So you see that these men set up camp, if you will, in specific geographic region, and then their sons built cities. Okay? All right. And so Cush begat Nimrod, who began to be mighty on the earth. Now, this map, I'm not going to, there's a little bit of a confusion in this, but as you look at this, you'll see the names of the people here, the names of these men as they moved out across the area and left the Mesopotamian area and spread out into the world. Note, of course, that was not something that they intended to do originally, that God closed that door behind them. You know, God has that way. You know, he sets your house on fire and then he opens up a window that he wants you to go through. Okay? And that's because he's got a plan for you. All right? So as we look at that, we see that Cush begat Nimrod, and he began to be mighty upon. There are old monoliths, if you will, old inscriptions that archaeologists have found who mention the name of a man named Nimrod, a man who started the work of building a great tower. Is that ringing a bell? Okay, all right. And so according to the Targum, he began to be bold in sin, a murderer of the innocent, and a rebel before the Lord. And it is believed that he is the Nimrod in ancient Mesopotamian historical artifacts who was credited with starting to build a great tower. And in my mind, I start to think that is Babel. Okay? And we'll start to look at some other descendants and see some things that happen as well. So Mizraim, remember that is Arabia, begat Ludim and Ananim and Lehabim and Naptuhim and Pathrusim and Casluhim. You want to take over for me here, Pat? I'm kidding. Pathrusim and Casluhim, of whom came the Philistines and Captorim. Now remember that the Philistines also started out as a seagoing nation who then moved ashore and settled in the land of Canaan. Okay? So you see the Philistine nation listed here in the Bible. All right? Now, modern Zionists have done a really good job of rewriting history so that they say the Philistines are really illegitimate members, illegitimate occupants. But remember that the Philistines were there before and that the Jews were tasked by God with expelling them from the land, and they never did. Okay? And so God took the land away from them. Now they're doing what they said they were. Now they're going to go, okay, we'll do this. We'll do this. we're going to expel them. Well, it's a little late for that. God has already kicked them off of that land. The fact that they're back there again is not in accordance with God's plan per se. It is more the will of men than anything else. Okay? And that's because there are so many who misunderstand Revelation, who are premillennialists, who feel that the Jews being on that land is essential because Jerusalem is going to once again become the capital of the world in the new world order. Okay? And I can't figure out how they got there from here. It's unfortunate. But, okay. So we get to 1 Chronicles 13 through 15, and we see that Canaan begat Zidon and his firstborn Heth. And here you go again, Zidon. Tyre and Sidon are two cities where the seagoing nations did their trade and brought their trade onto the land. Unfortunately, they also dealt in slaves too. Okay? And that was why God destroyed Tyre and Sidon ultimately. All right. And so then we see that that Canaan begat Heth, and then the Jebusite, also the Amorite and the Girgashite. Remember that these are peoples that God told Abraham that God told Moses that he was going to expel. Okay? These are the peoples that stood in the way of the Jewish occupation of Canaan. All right? And then he talks about the Hivite. There's another one. The Archite, the Sinite. Sinite is the Sinai Peninsula, occupants of the Sinai Peninsula. So you see the geographic measure, the spreading that goes on. All right? And then we get to the Arvadite, the Zemarite, and the Hamathite in verse 16. And then we go to the sons of Shem. We've jumped back. We've talked about Cush. We've talked about Ham. We've talked about Japheth. And now we talk about Shem. Elam, and Asher, and Arphaxad, and Lud, and Aram, and Uz, and Hul, and Gaither, and Meshach. Okay? And then we jump to Arphaxad, who begat Shelah, and Shelah begat Eber, and unto Eber were born two sons. The name of one was Peleg. Do I have that yet? We've done that. All right. And Shelah begat Eber, and unto Eber were born two sons, was Peleg. And that name means the earth divided. All right? Because in his days the earth was divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. Now, according to the Targum, okay, according to the ancient commentary, because in his days, Peleg's days, the inhabitants of the earth were divided according to their languages. Okay? So God confused the languages to break up the work on the Tower of Babel. So you're seeing the historical correlation going on here, okay? And the name of the brother was Joktan because in his days, now get this, in the days of Joktan, the years of men began to be shortened on account of their iniquities. God shortened the lifespan of the men from that generation on. So Shem's generation was the last generation that enjoyed a full lifespan. And after that, their descendants experienced a shortening of their lifespan. No more were their lifespans measured in terms of hundreds of years, but only in terms of decades. Phil?
Catastrophic changes in the earth.
Absolutely.
Because of the flood. And basically, before the flood, there was no such thing as rain.
Right.
And it was a biosphere. And scientists have concluded from some of the archaeological finds that the air pressure on Earth in this biosphere was higher than what we enjoy now.
Absolutely. And hyperbaric chambers are good for healing and good for reducing cell degeneration. Okay, so if under pressure, if you could keep somebody under pressure long enough, you could extend their lifespan in theory. Okay, but now it's interesting to note that, because the other thing that's interesting is that you look at the orbital planes, the axis of rotation of all the planets in the solar system, in our solar system at least, but also the exoplanets and the things that they have found in the different or going around the different suns that they've been able to find through the Webb telescope and the Palomar Observatory and all these, have determined that Earth is unique in that Earth's axis of rotation is tilted relative to the plane of rotation of the planets. And it's the only one in this solar system for sure, but the only one that people have been able, that scientists have been able to observe thus far in the known, that is close enough to us to be observed universe, okay, makes Earth very unique. We'll talk about that a little bit today as well. But Venus is probably the most similar to what Earth was, although far enough away that it was not, that nothing would cook. In Venus, the prevalent gases are probably methane, okay, because it's too close to the sun, and all the lighter elements boil off. Okay, but we need oxygen, we need nitrogen, we need the perfect mix. But we had a hyperbaric system involved. And all the plants were watered by the moisture, the mist, a dew watered the plants. And if you'll note that even plants today on misty days, I've got some plants, for instance, I've got some, well, I can't even think of the name of them now, that will sit in the pot. And if I don't water them, if it's misty for a couple of 3 days, I walk out and the ground is wet around the plants in my pot. They water themselves from the mist. They have that capability. Even today, they have that capability. But when God flooded the earth, something different happened. And you look at, and you wonder, where could all the water come from? Okay, well, there's volcanic activity. It blows all this moisture up into the air and blows all these particulates into the air, and everything condenses and we get rain. We also get flooding. And if you think that's not possible, Blue Springs out here, what's the rate of flow of Blue Springs? 15,000 gallons a minute out of there. That's just one spring of hundreds, thousands of springs in the state of Florida. Rivers of water running under the earth that were opened up and flooded. Probably the earth even collapsed a little bit as it did. And when it did, it sits on the water. It sits on this cushion of water, and the continents break up and they drift apart and they move much faster than the archaeologists and the scientists want us to believe. We're talking about in thousands of years, not in millions of years, that it took this earth to configure itself the way that it did. And that's the hand of God. And we didn't have seasons until we had axial tilt. And now we have seasons. And God indicated that that's exactly what happened as a result. God has given us information in the Bible that if we had paid attention, our scientists would not be running in circles and going off in the wrong direction. All right, enough of that. Okay, so I'm going to jump past Joktan and Almadad and the others, and I'm going to go right on back up to, note that we start with Shem, okay? And then we talk about all the sons, and we talk about those people who erred, who kind of went off in the wrong direction. And then it's going to jump back in verse 24. Let me see if I've got that. Verse 24 through 27, it jumps back to Shem and starts again with a particular line, a particular lineage from Shem, okay? Shem through Arphaxad, through Shelah, through Eber, through Peleg, through Ru, through Serug, through Nahor, through Terah, and Avram, Abraham. He became known as Abraham. And Terah was Avram's brother. And remember that he spent time in Terah, and then God pressed him on into Canaan as he continued to migrate. And when he did so, he took Lot with him, who was actually Terah's son. Okay? All right. So, and then he talks about their generations, the sons of Abraham. He goes to the sons of Abraham. These are the sons of Isaac and Ishmael. And these are their generations. The firstborn of Ishmael. Ishmael was Nebaioth, then Kedar, then Abdil, and Mibsam, Mishma, and Duma, and Massa, and Hadad, and Tema, Jetur, Naphish, and Kedemah. These are the sons of Ishmael. All right? Will he go back to those families? I don't know. He might. I've not. It's hard to follow, but I do know this. He jumps to verse 32. Remember, he had. I'm trying to remember Ishmael's mom and then mother, and I can't remember who that was. Abraham had two wives. He had a wife and he had a concubine. Hagar, yes, okay. So he had Hagar and he had Sarah. That's right. Okay. So, but there's also a third that is mentioned here. The sons of Keturah, Abraham's. The word is concubine. That's not correct. Imram and Jokshan and Medan and Midian and Shua and Sheba. The Midianites, the Shuahites. Sheba is also a place in North Africa. Okay, remember the queen of Sheba who came to visit Solomon? Okay, all right. So then Keturah is Abraham is called Abraham, but according to the Targum, she is actually called a wife of the second rank. In other words, he definitely had feelings for her more than a concubine to Abraham. Okay. And then we see that Abraham begat Isaac. And then he talks about the sons of Isaac, Esau and Israel, Jacob. Okay? And the sons of Esau, Eliphaz and Ruel and Jewesh and Jaleb. Okay, now I've highlighted the name Ruel here, and there's a reason for that. Remember when Moses brought the people back in and Moses lived with Jethro, worked with Jethro, married Jethro's daughter. So Jethro was her father-in-law. Guess what? That's Ruel. He was also called Esau, a man of God. He became Moses' father-in-law, religious mentor. Remember that he set up the sacrifice with Moses when they first came into the Sinai. Okay? And continued to advise him. Remember when he gave him advice on the fact that he was wearing himself out and he had to appoint administrators who would report to him so that he could handle only important things? That counsel. That was Ruel's counsel. And so you see, you go back and review Exodus 18, you will see that the account of what Jethro was able to do for the children of Israel through the advice that he gave to Moses is very profound. Okay? All right. Now we talk about the sons of, just in passing, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. Verse 38, the son of Seir. We've been told that Seir, it means hairy, okay? That Seir is also a descendant, a name for a descendant of Esau. Okay? We've talked about that. Esau is Seir, and Seir is Esau. So are we talking about his descendants when we talk? Remember that there's a mountain there called Mount Seir, and it is one of the land and whenever he says Esau is Seir, he probably means that region which is around the coast of Mount Seir. But that is named after one of his sons. Okay? One of his grandsons, actually. All right. And so we're going to jump. I'm going to start with, we're going to take a break here. We will start in verse 43 when we come back, because I don't see a lot of names as we follow on that are names that we would have seen as we have studied the Old Testament before. But we're going to go to the kings of Edom when we come back. read them, and we're going to kind of push through and try to skim over at least the genealogy of David's sisters, families, okay, or yeah, of David's family. We're gonna try to concern ourselves primarily with David and what David's family, and then we'll go from there. So we'll pick up in First Chronicles 1:43. I'm going to mark that when we come back next Sunday. Are there any questions or comments? Phil, thank you so much for pushing me into some of those directions that needed to be addressed. We'll take a break. We'll be back in a few short minutes for the start of our service. And thank you for your patience. I know we kind of ran over a little bit this morning.